On this episode of Take This Down, I sit down with Susan Garnett, CEO of MHMR of Tarrant County. We talk about her upbringing in a small town in Florida, how early on in her childhood, her mom knew she was destined for social work, and how moving to Texas ultimately led her to running MHMR of Tarrant County. You're going to want to take this down. You're going to want to take this down. Well, Susan, I want to thank you for taking the time and sitting down with me. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and I know you're a busy woman, so I don't take it lightly. You finding the time to join me today.
Ty, glad to be with you.
Yeah. Well, it's a tradition of mine of always telling my guests why I invited them on. When I was coming up with this show, I made a list of probably about 40 or 50 individuals that I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with. You and I had the opportunity to work together and collaborate at my previous stint as a prosecutor. And one, it was something that I didn't know much about MHMR, everything that you all do, and the many hats that you personally have to wear. And I was taken aback, like in the sense of like, wow, but also like, wow, there's not enough people knowing that know about the great things that you and your team are doing. And so I wanted to bring you on. Thank you for everything that you do, but also present a platform to allow you to talk about yourself, your background, but also the great things that you and your team are doing. So, just to kind of jump right into it, who is Susan Garnett at her core?
So I would say I am just a social worker and a mom who wants services out there and wants to make connections for people that help them lead better lives. Our agency is a big agency that serves a wide variety of people. And I feel like I understand a lot about the people who come looking for services. I don't know if you know or not that I have 3 sons, and one of my sons has a significant intellectual disability. And so he's going to be 42 this summer, lives at home with us, receives Medicaid, needs the services of my agency. So when I first came to work at MHMR, it was really for totally selfish reasons. What was Brian's future going to be? I wanted to be a part of what Brian's future was. And being in this agency and in this role has helped me ensure that services are available for people in our community, sometimes even people who don't yet know they're going to need us, but that when they are ready for us, we'll be there.
That's good. That's good. So talk a little about your background. I understand you're not a Texan, but you're a Texan at heart, if you will.
Well, I've been here so long, it's hard to think that I'm not a Texan, but I am a Floridian. I was a native from in Florida, and I grew up in a very small town that was the county seat of our town. My dad worked for the county. I have 4 siblings, and we grew up in kind of a Mayberry kind of a town, where you got up in the morning and you went out on your bike and you came back by dinner time, and the community was safe for that. As I look back on it, I think, what did people who had mental health conditions or intellectual disabilities do? I don't really know. After I grew up, had a child with disabilities, and as he grew up, my mother reminded me that when I was a kid, there was a house kind of across our yard that there was a girl who was at the window sometimes looking out. And on reflection now, I know she had intellectual disabilities, and she wanted to come out and play with the kids, but she was a grown-up and she couldn't come out and play with the kids. And I was always so curious about, who is she and what does she do all day? Well, today, I understand that in a much better way. And we have much richer resources available for people with disabilities than we would have back those many years ago.
Would you say growing up in Florida, just generally, was there a stigma associated with mental health or individuals with intellectual disabilities, or was, everyone treated the same?
So I think generationally, the topic of stigma has changed so much. I think about my parents, and I think they would have completely rejected any notion of reaching out and getting any kind of mental health assistance right? People of my generation are like, well, if I had to get help, I might get it, but I wouldn't tell anybody. People of my children's generation see no stigma. And my little tiny under 10-year-old grandchildren have the language of social and emotional development and can say, oh, that's bullying, or, oh, that made me feel bad. People, generationally, we've learned to talk about these things, which is ultimately a good thing for us.
So did you know from an early age you wanted to get into social work?
Again, my mother tells me I did. My mother has all kinds of stories about, when I would walk home from school and a lady who, on reflection, had Alzheimer's, was lost on the street, and I knew where she belonged, and I walked her back home, and my mother was like, "You're destined for social work. It was just what you did." And so when I went to college and found social work as a field, it just felt right to me because it was so much about helping people, but helping people figure out how to help themselves, helping people figure out where they could connect so that they could then manage their own care as much as possible. I think for all of us, we want resources to be available when we really need them, but we don't want them in our lives too much. So we want to, when we can manage things on our own, we want to be able to do that. And then when we really need to reach out, we want somebody there to help us.
So you leave home, you go to college, you get your degree in social work. Is it everything that you thought it was going to be?
It really was. The very first job I had out of undergraduate school, I have a graduate degree too, but my first job out of undergraduate school was working in a residential facility for adults with what we called then mental retardation. Today we say intellectual disabilities. And I thought, well, I've never been around anybody like that. This will be interesting. So I had that job for a few years. I then got my master's degree. And when I completed my master's degree, I went to work for the prosecutor's office. In Florida, it's called the state attorney's office instead of the district attorney's office. And the state attorney there, I lived in Miami, was Janet Reno, who later became the Attorney General of the United States. And I ran a program for juveniles who had committed property offenses. And she was one of the things that Janet Reno was famous for was really looking for diversionary kind of activities that didn't get people more deeply involved in the criminal justice system, but rather said, let's figure out how we can support people to get them on track to get out instead of to get deeper in. And I think she was an enormous lesson for me about how you can use the levers of public work for good purpose, to make a difference in people's lives, and to not just to recognize that pursuing justice is not about pursuing convictions. It's about pursuing what makes a difference in people's lives and what makes a difference for society.
I like that. And so, you now in Miami at the state attorney's office, mm-hmm. you get that experience. Mm-hmm. Were you ready for the next challenge, or what was the next challenge?
So I met now my husband. He was finishing up his PhD at the University of Miami in psychology. And he said to me, you know what we should do? We should move to Texas. And this was before the internet existed. And I thought, okay, Texas, let's go to Texas for a while. That seems reasonable. I didn't realize you moved places, you had babies, and you never moved again. I didn't realize that was a thing. And I also had no idea what the temperature was. So I had been to Texas only one time. I had come at Thanksgiving to visit my husband's family, and there were snowflakes on the windshield. And I was like, go to the place with snowflakes? That sounds fantastic. Let's go. And so I arrived here pregnant and had a baby in July. I was utterly miserable and complained nonstop about moving to Texas.
So how was that challenge other than the weather and, starting your family?
Other than the weather and the misery? Oh, it was okay. But it made me realize how different we are state to state. I can remember when one of my kids was ready to start in Florida, what we would have called public schools. And I went to look it up to the P's, and I could not find public school. And I finally said to somebody, how do you find the public schools here? And they said, you mean the independent school districts? And I was like, the what? So I just, it made me think about how different we are state to state. So I had the incredible good fortune of being able to be a stay-at-home mom for a number of years with my kids, and particularly because I had one child with disabilities, it really enabled me to focus on some advocacy activities and And I was involved with statewide organizations and chaired some statewide organizations and involved with some national activities around disabilities. And so, it really helped sharpen my thinking about, where I wanted to be and what I wanted to invest my time in. And then the opportunity arose to come to work here at MHMR. And so I've been at MHMR about 27 years, I think 28 years, something like that. And have just continued to, really, I marvel at our mission and that all we can do for people. People who come to our service system are coming usually in some of the most complicated times in their lives and looking for somewhere to turn. I talk a lot about intellectual disabilities because that's what my family, experiences. But people come to us with new babies who are being identified as having a developmental delay, and their pediatrician has told them that maybe they would benefit from early childhood intervention programs, which are programs designed for kids birth to 3. And we hope to get kids off on a good start. We hope that kids graduate from our program and never need another resource. But if they do need a resource, we hope that they understand how to get them. But we really want kids to do well. We serve children who might be in school who are struggling with an emotional issue at school and struggling with school performance. Families are struggling. Teenage years are tough enough. And when you add the layer of a kid who has some kind of learning difference, that challenges. And then when people hit adulthood and the system for childhood that's been complicated, when they get to adulthood, they long for a system like we have in childhood that includes schools and other kinds of supports. Frequently, we deal with people who might have even had insurance as children, but as they become adults and on their own, they no longer have insurance. And so really, it's the state that steps in to provide funding for people who are otherwise uninsured and who need supports to get better. And we're able to provide visits with doctors, in-home kinds of supports, all the things that we can think might help somebody do better as time goes by.
So you've been at MHMR for 27 years. Nothing's changed over that time, right?
Yeah, we're a lot bigger and a lot different, really, than we are. So I would say my observation is one of the biggest differences is that when I first came to MHMR, a lot of our focus was on what does the state require us to do. We have a contract with the state, and the state funds services in our communities. Communities all over the state. The state funds services for people who are uninsured, for people who might not have any other resource to reach out to. And when I came to MHMR, the primary focus was on what does the state require of us. I would say the biggest transition over time has been that we really embrace our role as being a part of our community and say, what does our community need from us? And how can we then take the state with its requirements and apply those to make the difference that our community wants to have made?
From a community standpoint, do you think that the community as a whole is aware of all the services that you all provide at MHMR?
So I think, like many things, the community as a whole probably isn't so familiar with us. We hope that people who really need us are familiar with us. You might have been told about something a lot of times, but you didn't really need it. When you really need it, then we hope you can remember that you need it. So we're very fortunate here in that we have created good partnerships, or we benefit from the good partnerships we have with the county, with cities, with police departments, with the sheriff's department, with school districts, with healthcare providers, because all of us are a part of improving the lives of people with the kinds of disabilities that we work with, and we're incredibly fortunate in Tarrant County. If people haven't ever experienced living in other communities, it's hard to imagine how fortunate we are in terms of the collaborative nature of our community and the desire in our community to figure out what needs to be done and to get that done. I work with folks from other parts of Texas, other major urban areas in Texas, and there's frequently conversations about who can and can't do this and who's talking to who about what and who won't talk to who about what and those kinds of things. We're much less likely to have that here in Tarrant County, and the citizens of our community benefit from that approach.
And what do you think makes our community so special to where we do have more of a collaborative approach to handling, the needs of our community regards to mental health?
I think some of it is a lot of us have worked together for a long time, and I think that helps. I think really getting to know people, relationships are the secret sauce for much of collaboration. And so when people have really taken an opportunity to know one another, we have, for mental health here in Tarrant County, a collaborative, although we also have collaboratives on a lot of other initiatives too, but we do have a mental health collaborative here that MHMR, as well as other community agencies, the county, the city of Fort Worth, John Peter Smith Hospital, the Fort Worth ISD, a lot of community agencies helped to build. And we built that 25 years ago with the shooting at Wedgwood Baptist Church, when the then mayor, Ken Barr, looked around and said, I don't know who you're supposed to talk to about mental health. We need to be better organized on mental health. And he really challenged the mental health community to come together and to step away from thinking about who's going to get this contract and who's not going to get this contract and who's responsible for this and who's not allowed to do this. And instead think, how do we work together to do right for our community? And so we really have, in that collaborative, have worked together to build infrastructure that helps everybody. If there's training, let's have all agencies, small and large agencies, be able to participate in the training. If there's initiatives that will improve things for kids in our community, let's all work together to figure out how to do that. And that's been a good thing.
As CEO, has there been a particular program, initiative, or growth within MHMR that you're particularly proud of?
I think the things that I'm always the proudest of are things where we didn't go alone, where we went with other people. Sometimes that makes it more complicated, and sometimes that makes it take longer to get to success. But in the end, you get a better product. So, I'm proud of the way we work with JPS, for example, for people who might have a need for an inpatient hospitalization, but ongoing outpatient care that they might receive from us, and the fact that we can work together in a seamless way. When we work with ACH Child and Family Services to serve children who are in the most difficult periods of their life, along with families who are sometimes contemplating abandoning those children because it's gotten so hard for them to stick with their children. And the important thing to me is that I always think that people who are in need of services aren't really thinking about which agency am I going to get those services from. Is it a public agency or is it a nonprofit? Is it for profit or is it, what kind of the corporate? That's not what they're thinking. What they're thinking is, I need help. Is somebody going to help me? Whoever helps me, that's who I want to have help me. That's what I want. Whoever can figure out what's the thing that matters most to me and help me get that right now so that my life can get better. That's what matters to me. And that's who we all ought to be for kids and families in our community. Because helping kids and families in our community, helping adults who are in times of great struggle in their life isn't just about helping them. There's a family system that gets helped. There's a community that gets made better. There's a neighborhood that no longer is enduring, the noise or the difficulties or something unusual that's happening. It's all of those things. So we make it better for everybody if we come back and we say, what can we do different right here for that one person?
That's good. That's good. I know I've often heard about, people having secondhand trauma and, just the emotional, I hate to use the word emotional strain, but the emotional drain that comes with working in heavy subject matters. How do you balance, knowing that you're making a difference in people's life, but also, you see people at some of their lowest states because of what they're going through. How do you balance that?
So, we do offer up a lot of resources for our staff because, today, 15, 20 years ago, we would have never talked about trauma. We wouldn't have talked about the trauma of the initial trauma of an incident or the secondary trauma of observing or of talking about it. We wouldn't have really faced that. Today, we do talk about that, and we especially talk about that for our staff. I think for those who are, in my seat, the people who get to sit in offices, it's important to hear about the traumatic events that happen for the people who live in our community, but for the purposes of saying, what can we do better? How can we help one fewer person experience this trauma next time? How do we need to reorganize something that we do? How do we need to reach out to people? How do we need to get people the services that they need? And, I always feel like if you can figure out how to help somebody else, you can fix things for yourself. the people who struggle are people generally who can't figure out how to reach out beyond themselves. We want people to reach beyond themselves. Our staff want to reach beyond ourselves.
I know you have a lot of experience just in the social work, realm, if you will. But is there any memorable story that's a positive that you remember or can think about, like, when I was in Florida, I remember this instance, or maybe 5 years ago that just really sticks out and just kind of tugs on your heartstrings?
So I'll tell you a story about somebody that I worked with when I was a brand new social worker. So this was like probably 45 years ago. And it was in a residential facility for adults with disabilities. And she has very significant intellectual and physical disabilities. And she just didn't want to live in a residential facility. She wanted to be independent. And so she did the thing that nobody even knew how to discharge people. We only knew how to enroll people. We didn't know how to have people leave. And she said, I'm leaving. And she left. And she figured out on her own how to kind of make her way. She married. She had a child. Her child, as it happens, was born around the same time that my child with disabilities was born. I moved to Texas. She's still in Miami, but she and I stayed in touch, right? And we continued to talk to one another. When her child was born, because her child was born to a mom with disabilities, they wanted to do a lot of additional kind of testing on her, and over time determined that her child was gifted. Her child was being tested and determined to be gifted about the same time that my child was being tested and determined to have the diagnosis mental retardation. And I remember when I talked to her and I said to her, well, my baby Brian, the doctors have figured out that he has mental retardation. She said, for real? And I said, yes. And she said, it's not such a bad life. And so she provided me with the kind of support as a part of our relationship together. So over years, we've stayed in touch. And sometimes she would call me to do math homework with her daughter. When the math homework was more complicated for her, and I would get on the phone. And of course, by the time the kid was in about 5th grade, it was too complicated for me too. Mm-hmm. So I could give her advice about how to go get tutoring. And I remember hearing from her daughter when her daughter was about 19 or 20, after she graduated from high school, and she went to school to be, I think, like a nursing task. And the daughter sent me a note, and so her daughter sent me a note and said, through my whole life, when I didn't know what would happen to us when things were complicated or bad things had happened, I always knew if we called you, you would help us figure it out. I always knew you would help us. You were the one person we could always call. And I've always thought about that and thought, what would it be like to have been a kid with no one to call, right? Everybody needs somebody. I live an incredibly blessed life. I have family. I have friends. I have coworkers. I have plenty of people in my life who want to reach out, even in the hardest time, who want to find a way to help me through that hardest time. When we talk about people who have disabilities, when we talk about people who live in poverty, when we talk about people who live in very fragile circumstances, usually at the root of it is they have not one person to reach out to.
No, that's a powerful story, but I think you hit the head on the nail. Like, some people need someone. People need someone,
and we can all be someone for somebody.
So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and in the spirit of what you just mentioned about, people just needing someone, how can myself and, the community, and maybe even someone who's watching and listening to this interview, make people not only aware about mental health, but also more aware about MHMR of Tarrant County?
So, I think there's a lot of different ways. I think certainly, if you have the ability to do it, there's a lot of good, strong organizations in Tarrant County who support people's mental health needs, who would love to have you contribute, whether you were more interested in children, more interested in adults, more interested in older people. There's a lot of people that would be interested in that kind of help. There's also just plain thinking about the friends and neighbors that you have, right? And thinking about, whether it's older people who are in nursing homes that maybe you have an aunt that you haven't seen very much. It would mean a lot to her to visit her. Maybe it's about that relative or that person that you know who you think might be struggling, that maybe you say, do you need some help with something? If people really need help, today we have a call center that's available 24/7 for people to call, and it can be reached as simply as dialing 988. Anywhere in America, somebody with a phone from our area code, you can be anywhere and you can call and get help right here at home, where we can do a screening, when we can link you to the right kinds of mental health resources for whatever you're struggling with. But the most important thing is for people to feel supported and to feel like it's okay to reach out. And if you're an employer who has people who work for you, and you kind of wonder about how things are going for somebody, the important thing is to talk to them and to try and get this thing figured out and try and figure out where there are resources that help them. Some people benefit by coming to us. Certainly, if you have no insurance, you're probably going to benefit by coming to us or to JPS for mental health services. If you're insured, you have resources, and they're as close as the telephone number on your insurance card. But the best thing to do is to reach out. Issues that involve mental health conditions don't generally get better by ignoring them. They get better when we go in and address them.
45 years from now, we're at Susan Garnett's retirement party. and
Only if there's a Susan Garnett Jr.
And, you're in front of everyone, and it's your turn to speak and to give your kind of address, if you will. How do you want people to remember you?
I hope people remember that I tried really hard to make a difference in individual people's lives, and that, that I did my best, that I tried hard to say, where are connections that can be made on people's behalf? Where can we do just a little bit, just struggle a little bit more, to do a little harder than you thought you could do? Because I find generally people can do a little more than they think they can do. And how do we make a difference for people's lives? How do we have a community that embraces all of us, no matter what we bring to the table, that the community embraces all of us, and with an understanding nod, and instead of looking at people and thinking, well, I don't know why they're like that. Instead, we say, oh, what can I do to help? How can I lean in when somebody needs something, instead of leaning back?
Well, Susan, I want to thank you again for taking the time and sit down with me. This has truly been a great conversation and truly impactful for me, and I hope it has been the same for you. So thank you again for joining me.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks, Ty.
If you are a loved one or struggling with mental health or need someone to talk to, please call 988. A mental health professional is waiting to speak with you.